The entities. We only know that they represent an emotion or a sin because of the religious references indoors, and their only goal is to kill us, which is why today I'm covering each one to find out where they come from and what they are. From Rush to Queen Grumble, here's every entity indoors explained. Rush flickers the lights before he rushes the player, hence his name. Rush resembles a manic face that seems rageful, so he could possibly represent a sin or negative emotion like rage. Ambush is like Rush, but he comes back and ambushes the player after he goes ahead in the doors, causing the player to have to time hiding and watching. Ambush resembles a screaming face, possibly representing something like insanity because he's constantly repeating his actions. Hide appears when the player sits in a closet or locker for too long. He is an abstract red creature that would represent something like anxiety because he only shows up after we are in a locker hiding from entities for too long. Halt will first flicker the lights before chasing the player slowly and constantly teleporting behind and in front of the player, while showing arrows on the screen to indicate he's changing sides. Halt is a blue ghost with glowing eyes, possibly representing something like double-mindedness or going back on one's word because he constantly changes where's at undecidedly. Eyes will sit and wait in a room for the player to look at him to damage the player. Eyes is a bundle of eyes that represents something like social anxiety or paranoia because Eyes hates people looking at it. Seek is our first boss entity that we see indoors. He chases us down while Guiding Light helps us escape from him, while Seek will use his goo to create hands that will try to grab us or will knock down furniture to prevent us from escaping. We know that Seek has the ability to corrupt us and other entities like Screech or Queen Grumble, meaning that he has the capability to be more powerful than any other entity indoors. We also know that he has eyes everywhere in the floors because his eyes appear before and after we get near to him, possibly meaning that he has them planted in every room to watch us. Because Seek can corrupt entities, I think that he represents the deadly sin of envy. This is because he constantly wants more things to corrupt and literally puts eyes around the floors to have an eye on anything that he wants. He also chases us down and will destroy anything in his path to get what he wants. Screech will whisper to us before we catch him, or he attacks us, both of which will result in him screeching at us. Screech is a Seek-corrupted Giggle from Floor 2 that can somehow appear in Floor 1 even though he shouldn't, possibly meaning that he follows Seek like a leader. We know that Seek changed his vocal cords to be louder, and to also make them be more agile and quiet than the Giggles, hence why they can stick onto us without making much noise. The figure is the second boss we see indoors. He goes off of sound and whatever he catches in his spotlight in front of his head, charging at whatever he hears or sees and destroying it. We see what seems to be multiple figures indoors. We see one in the library and one at the end of the hotel. And then we see multiple figures in the mines that are spread across as we traverse. The figures seem to come from these flesh puddles that we see in the mines and inside of the castle walls at the end of Floor 2. It seems like they are similar to Seek in the sense that they can manifest or grow from these puddles found across the floors. The only problem is that we don't see these puddles in the hotel, making me think that there are multiple figures spread across the floors. This could possibly because we know the figure eats the Gloom Bats in the mines, which could be why we see more flesh puddles in the mines, which could be from previous figures reproducing asexually. Because the figure goes off of sound, and what's directly in front of him, I think that he represents rage because of the fact that he destroys anything that makes sound with rage. He is also blind, hinting at the term blind rage. And past this, he devours constantly, which almost none of the other entities do, possibly representing how rage devours everything around it. Dread only appears after the player waits in a room for hours on end and then progresses, resulting in the lights going out and Dread spawning him to kill the player. Now what's strange is that Dread is the only entity that will make the player hear their own breathing. Now, I have a theory that Dread will be manifested as a much bigger entity in a later floor because of how interesting his mechanics are. Now obviously he represents Dread, which although isn't a deadly sin, would fit into the fact that doors will have 10 floors, and there are only 7 deadly sins, hence why he could be a much bigger boss later on. Jeff is the shopkeep indoors and sells us useful items that we can use later on. However, Jeff somehow has access to hard-to-find items like the crucifix that literally empowers a celestial to kill or restrict an entity. This makes me believe that although Jeff looks and seems friendly, he represents the sin of greed. Now, although I love Jeff, think about it. He charges a lot of gold for products that we need. He will kill us when we try to steal anything, and he is represented as a tentacle monster. Throughout history, octopuses and squids represent greed because of their many tentacles that are used to grab anything and everything. We also don't don't see Jeff's full body, and just his eyes with 2 tips of his tentacles. This could mean that Jeff could possibly be a later boss in the game that wants to prevent us from getting out due to a celestial making him, or because we might get near to his gold storage that he hides from us. Now you might be asking, who will take over the shop when Jeff is gone? Well, El Goblino has a voice line that says he always wanted a shop of his own, which would be like foreshadowing to him taking over Jeff's shop when he's gone in the floors after Jeff's boss fight. El Goblino is a Latino goblin that's friendly toward us and talks to us. We know that he has a mom and some sort of relationship with a girl because of his voice lines. We also know through his voice lines that he is aware of the fact Doors takes place in a limbo or hell-like place because he wonders why he got here, and is also aware of the higher powers like Guiding Light and even possibly even Curious Light and Mischievous Light because of his lines. Bob saw those blue particles, but they weren't blue, implying Curious Light's particles. And also when he used a crucifix in the figure, it turned red, implying Mischievous Light's powers. El Goblino seems to not represent anything because he got here naturally, possibly meaning that he will leave with us when we escape.
I am dead.
Bob is the friend of El Goblino and doesn't talk to us. We know that he is either an entity or a dead human that still somehow talks and explores the floors, because we hear El Goblino talk about him like he is alive. Bob, much like El Goblino, doesn't represent anything yet, because he is a skeleton. He could represent death, but I doubt that's the case because he's mostly been seen as just being friendly and has no foreshadowing from El Goblino like Jeff, so I'm guessing he will escape with us at the end of Doors too. Gloom Bats are bats that come out of eggs found in the mines. They attack the player whenever they have a light source that isn't a glow stick. They function similar to moths in the sense of them flying towards illuminated things, which is why the figure has a spotlight so the Gloom Bats will fly inside of it, similar to an anglerfish and its prey. Because Gloom Bats go after whatever is shiny and has light, I think that they represent something like consumerism, and not directly something as powerful as envy because of their direct correlation with the figure who consumes them. Giggles sit on top of the ceilings in the mines and giggle while waiting for the player to go below it so it can drop down on their face, causing the player to have to shake it off or for another player to help detach it. Giggles are weak to laser pointers, and also are baby versions of the Grumbles we see after floor 150, which means that they are from reproduction, making them different from every other entity indoors. Because Giggles laugh and latch onto the player, I think they represent attachment. The Grumbles are the more mature version of Giggles that patrol the nest in floor 150. We know that there are at least 5 of them, and they protect the Giggles and eggs from the Grumble family. Grumbles work like worker ants in the Grumble family and will make Giggles with the queen. They also seem to have grown 2 more tentacles as they've grown older, similar to the Screeches. Because Grumbles are just bigger Giggles that patrol the nest and have the need to protect, I think they represent obsession. Queen Grumble is the queen of the Grumbles and is the entity that chases us at the end of the first Seek chase in floor 2, and at the end of floor 2 when we enter the castle. She has 8 tentacles compared to the 6 that the regular Grumbles have, and also has a scar in the middle of her forehead, possibly from defending her nest against Seek, who wants to corrupt her babies. Because Queen Grumble is the main protector of the Grumbles, and she does it out of motherly love, I think she represents love. Now this sounds good, until we get to the end of floor 2 when she gets corrupted by Seek. Now when envy is mixed with love, it becomes lust, possibly making her become a boss in floor 3. Timothy is a spider that scares us occasionally when we open drawers or lockers. Timothy seems to just be like a gag, kinda like how Bob is, so I doubt he represents anything. Dupe is an entity that makes a duplicate of an exit door, making the player have to remember the number of the previous door to find out which one to go into. Because Dupe tried to trick the player, I think he represents trickery. Void only appears to kill anyone who is too far behind whoever the leading player is. Because Void goes after people who are left behind, I think he represents loneliness. Shadow is an extremely rare entity that only jump scares the player and does no damage. Because Shadow is a shadow, I think he represents the fear of the dark. Snare, when stepped on, damages the player with its pointy vines sticking out. Now the snares are interesting because they are a plant creature compared to how all of the other entities are types of animals, ghosts, or monsters, which is why I think their core might become a boss later on in floor 3. This is because all of the snares are connected by vines that we interact with in the greenery rooms in floors 1 and 2. Because they are connected, they have to have some sort of source, which I think will be seen in floor 3 because of the fact that we will be constantly going from inside to outside in the floor while also being around many plants. Hence why we might see the snare's core accompanied by leaked entities like the Venus flytrap. I think that the snares represent something like gossiping because they are interconnected and wait for you to get close to attack. Now it's time for the speed round. Blitz is a faster version of Rush. The Look Man is a variation of Eyes. A 60 is a different form of Rush, but he permanently takes out the lights. A 90 will appear on the player's screen and will kill them unless they stop moving. And finally, a 120 is like a reverse version of Rush coming from the front instead of the back. Haste is the boss of the back doors, who is a red skull that will appear when the player doesn't complete the minigame in time. Because Haste kills the player when they don't do something quick enough, I think Haste represents impatience. Guiding Light is a celestial that guides us throughout the doors. He takes the form of blue sparkles, and when the player dies, we see his spiritual form in the form of a moon. Guiding Light can make objects like mine carts or wheels, knock over smaller objects like candles, block entrances to prevent bigger entities from getting to the player, can also exorcise weaker entities like the PNGs, and can restrict bigger entities like the figure. We know Guiding Light also interacts with other passive entities like El Goblino because of his line about curious light that hints at him and Bob seeing Guiding Light's blue sparkles. Besides this, we know that Guiding Light's physical form is this statue in the courtyard that looks like a guardian angel. This could hint at him being the representation of good and life in general. Curious Light is the second celestial that we see, and strangely enough, we only see him in the rooms and the back doors. Unlike Guiding Light, Curious Light doesn't guide us or help us and lets us figure everything out for ourselves unless we die too many times, of which then he will give us a hint on what to do. It seems like Curious Light knows much more than they are letting on to, because they seem to have connections with Mischievous Light, because they say that she named the entities, which means that the she can't be Guiding Light because Guiding Light says this is what you would call the entities, seemingly hiding the truth of who named them from us. Curious Light most likely represents uncertainty, because they are uncertain if they should help us or not, and we are uncertain if they are on our side or not. Mischievous Light is the third and final celestial that seems to be against us. I say this because her symbol is the modifier's icon, which implies she has control over the entities. And also, whenever we crucify a more important entity like Seek, it turns red and breaks, implying that Mischievous Light, who is red, broke the seal from the crucifix. But other than that, we only know that she is like the opposite of Guiding Light, meaning that she most likely represents evil or death. And that was all of the entities indoors. Make sure to leave your theories down below and like and subscribe.